tensions are once again boiling between Afghanistan and Pakistan, and this comes after deadly cross-border clashes along the disputed Durand Line. Now, Afghanistan claims to have killed about 58 Pakistani soldiers in retaliation for Pakistani airstrikes, allegations that Islamabad denies at this point. Now, the violence has disrupted trade through the Torkham crossing and drawn calls for restraint from several nations. In fact, at the heart of this crisis is the fact that Pakistan accuses the Taliban of harboring a TTP, a militant group blamed for deadly attacks. Kabul rejects this charge, saying that the issue lies within Pakistan. Once allies, now the Taliban seems to be distancing itself from Islamabad in a bid to gain domestic legitimacy. And in fact, today in New Delhi, Taliban Foreign Minister Amir Muttaqi issued a sharp warning, saying that Afghanistan is capable of defending its borders and will respond firmly if provoked. In fact, Muttaqi also alleged that there are some elements in Pakistan that are trying to escalate tensions, even though most Pakistanis and their leaders want peace. Now, he also dismissed Islamabad's claims of cross-border terrorism, saying that Afghanistan has no TTP bases within its territory, and took a dig at Pakistan's leadership, in fact, saying that if Pakistan is truly advanced, it should maintain peace within its own borders. Muttaqi also said that Afghanistan has finally achieved internal peace after 4 decades of war, and now also wants the same along its frontiers. So clearly a warning and at the same time very strong statement against Pakistan.
पाकिस्तान के साथ हमारे ताल्लुकात का एक चीज़ वाज़ेह करना चाहता हूँ कि पाकिस्तान का आवाम और पाकिस्तान का जो सियासून है और हुकूमत में भी अक्सर लोग जो है वो अमन पसंद लोग हैं, वो अफ़गानिस्तान के साथ अच्छा ताल्लुकात चाहता है। पाकिस्तानी आवाम और पाकिस्तानी सियासून के साथ हमारा कोई मुश्किल नहीं है। पाकिस्तान में कुछ ख़ास हलके हैं जो हालात को ख़राब करने की कोशिश कर रहा है, तो अफ़गानिस्तान अपना सरहदों का, अपना फ़ज़ा का हक़ महफूज रखे, और जैसा कुछ खिलाफ वर्जियाँ हुआ है उसके फ़ौरन जवाब भी दिया। और फिर रात जो इंतकामी ऑपरेशन हुआ तो उसमें हमारा जो हदफ और मतलूब था वो हासिल हुआ। फिर हमारे दोस्त ममालिक जैसा कतर और सऊदी अरबिस्तान, उन्होंने ख्वास्ता, उन्होंने तलब किया कि अभी जंग रुकना चाहिए, तो हमारे तरफ से जंग रुका हुआ और अभी हालात कंट्रोल में हैं। तो हम अच्छा ताल्लुका चाहते हैं, हम मुज़ाकरात के दरवाज़े हमारा खुला है सबके लिए। हम अफ़गानिस्तान में अमन लाया है, हम सारे खित्ते के अमन चाहता है। तो ये एक बेहतरीन फ़ुर्सत आया है कि सब मसाइल मुज़ाकरे और मुफाहमे के रास्ते से हल होना चाहिए। अगर इस सिलसिले से कोई लोग हल नहीं करता है तो अफ़गानिस्तान एक खुसूसियत रखता है कि सारे ममालिक का सरहदों का और फ़ज़ा का जो हिफाजत है वो उस मुल्क के पहुँच कर रहा है। लेकिन वाहिद मुल्क अफ़गानिस्तान है कि तारीख़ के कई अरसों से लोग और हुकूमत मिलकर, फ़ौज और आवाम मिलकर आपने सरज़मीन से दिफा कर रहा है।
And now to take this conversation further, I am being joined by Ambassador Prabhu Dayal, former Indian diplomat, Imtiaz Gul, author and Executive Director, Centre for Research and Security Studies. He's joining us live from London. And we also have Professor Swaran Singh, Centre for International Politics, JNU. So thank you to all three of you for joining us on News9. Now, Ambassador Dayal, starting with you, first came the Kabul strikes, then attacks on Pakistani outposts, border clashes, and then retaliatory strikes by Pakistan. And now we are seeing a pause. Do you think this pause will last, or where are we headed according to your reading?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me on your show. I don't think that the tensions are going to ease so quickly. In fact, the tensions are boiling, and clashes are taking place between Pakistan and Afghanistan due to cross-border attacks and
Yes.
security concerns along the Durand Line. Now, there are long-standing issues over the 1,600-mile-long border, including disputes over the official demarcation and the construction of new security posts. Now, tensions have escalated as Pakistan has been accusing the Taliban of providing safe havens to militants from the TTP, or the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, who launched attacks into Pakistan. Now, in a recent incident, Pakistan conducted airstrikes in Kabul, targeting the TTP leadership, which prompted a retaliatory response from the Afghan Taliban with strikes on Pakistani posts along the border. Now, Pakistan claims that the Taliban-led government in Afghanistan is harboring militants from the TTP. However, Afghanistan denies it, and the current clashes were triggered after Pakistan conducted airstrikes in Afghanistan, as I said, targeting TTP leaders. There are also, of course, historical and political tensions that contribute to the conflict. And the main historical dispute between Afghanistan and Pakistan is the Durand Line that Afghanistan has never officially recognized. And this agreement, or this disagreement, is linked to the historical Pashtunistan issue, where Afghanistan historically advocated for the creation of an independent Pashtun state. Now, Afghanistan rejects the Durand Line because it was created under duress, and it splits the Pashtun ethnic group, while also being really a colonial agreement that Afghanistan argues is invalid after the British Raj ended. So the line is seen as an arbitrary border that ignores the cultural and ethnic unity of the Pashtun people, with many of their villages and farmlands divided by the boundary. Additionally, Afghanistan contends that it was not a party to the agreement that created modern Pakistan, and therefore any agreements made with the British government are not binding on the state of Afghanistan. So therefore, as the Afghan foreign minister said in Delhi, Afghanistan wants a peaceful solution, but if the peace efforts don't succeed, they have other options. So in my view, these tensions are not going to go away so easily.
All right, so you think the pause is not going to last. Now, Mr. Imtiaz Gul, the ambassador, rightly explained the points of contention that are present between Afghanistan and Pakistan. But you see, some of these issues have been there for a really long time. So because you have been tracking this region very closely, I want to understand, how did the relations between the two countries go south this way? And do you think it's Pakistan's own creation, own doing at this point?
Well, in the first place, there is no Durand Line. Pakistan has put a fence on the 2,560 kilometer, most of it. So this is, the Afghans never objected to that. There's a big fence dividing the two countries. And the tensions keep popping up every now and then, just because some Afghans, probably proxies also for other powers, they keep raising this issue, paddling the issue of a Durand Line, which is the official border between Pakistan and Afghanistan, internationally recognized. So these Afghans tend to live in the past. Whoever doesn't recognize this border is a prisoner of the past, and I don't think this argument by any Afghan minister or any Afghan leader would hold water when they talked about, if they talked about it at the United Nations or any other international fora. These guys, all of them, come to Pakistan after getting a visa. They can't come without holding a valid travel document. So this is an unnecessary irritant that the Afghans, those who don't like to improve relations with Pakistan, keep injecting in the national discourse, and particularly taking advantage of the situations that we saw in the last 2 days. And secondly, there is no, Amir Muttaqi may have said in New Delhi, there is no terrorist group in Afghanistan. But the reality is that the Afghan government received about $35 million from the government of United Arab Emirates 2-3 years ago to resettle families of the fighters and the fighters themselves away from the border provinces to the Ghazni province. I was very recently in Kandahar as well, and the Afghan Taliban regime does not deny that. So the Nur Wali Masood, the chief of TTP, lives very much in Kabul. A couple of years ago, a delegation went to Afghanistan and they wanted to see him. And Nur Wali Masood, on a notice of 1 hour, came to the residence or the office of Sirajuddin Haqqani, the interior minister, for this meeting with the Pakistani delegation of religious clerics. So, ground reality and a public statement are two different things. So and also thirdly, I mean, the Afghan Taliban represent the same group which your country has been lambasting as terrorists, as terrorists who have been holding the globally wanted terrorists and sheltering them. TTP is one of those groups. There is no denying that. And the fact that in the last 3 days alone, Pakistan Army has lost minimum 60 officers, including a colonel, and of other soldiers in about four terrorist attacks and the
All right.
recent.
Okay, I take your point. Professor Swaran Singh, you heard Ambassador and Imtiaz Gul as well. I want to understand, do you see what's happening right now as a failure of Pakistan's Afghan policy? And also, when we talk about TTP menace, who do we really have to blame at this point?
I think that's true because Taliban was originally a creation of Pakistan, particularly Pakistan military, to be specific, ISI. And therefore, if Taliban 2.0 has had constant problems resulting in rather violent skirmishes on the border, and now allegations or even airstrikes, I would agree with you that it can be described as failure of Pakistan's Afghan policy. Second, Durand Line has in history often been questioned by several Afghan leaders successively. And again, Taliban in last 4+ years doesn't recognize Durand Line, which they believe cuts Pashtuns from the middle. But right now it seems the concern is about TTP, and Pakistan is describing the Afghanistan Taliban being responsible for giving sanctuaries and support, and not holding them or reining in. And in that sense, that is seen as a trigger. But there are bigger, the structural forces which is making this violence much more dangerous. To me, more recently, the kind of cultivation and pampering that President Trump is doing to Pakistan military emboldens Pakistan military to push its way the way it wants to sort of re-earn its prestige, because repeatedly we have seen how Pakistani military has been treated in Balochistan, in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, and now also in the so-called occupied Kashmir area. And they need to urgently work on ensuring their credibility and prestige. Similarly, recently Taliban has received much better recognition. Russia has not just recognized but also exchanged ambassadors. We hear China, Uzbekistan, Indonesia, several countries, including India now, are doing de facto interactions. India is talking of starting an air corridor, expanding trade. So therefore, you hear the Foreign Minister Muttaqi warning Pakistan to learn from history and learn from British, from Soviet Union, Russia, and now from United States as to anyone who's tried to use force against Pakistan has had enormous problems and had to retreat ultimately. So that emboldened new attitude of Taliban also, I think, is partly responsible for a problem which is deeper, persistent, long-term, has not always resulted in that kind of enormous violence the way it is seen right now. And I think it's that kind of international structural forces which are, I think, pushing both sides to show that one-upmanship in that sense. And of course, it could also be related to their domestic constituencies. Taliban needs to also assert itself internally, given that there are factions, there are challenging outfits, etc., same as Pakistan. So both internal domestic constituencies and international forces together, I think, are creating a situation where both are fighting on the border, but primarily led by ensuring their own credibility and legitimacy in terms of being the rulers both in
All
Pakistan
right,
and in
Professor Singh.
Afghanistan.
So you say it's a cocktail of factors that has led us to this situation. Ambassador, I want to ask you, the timing of these clashes. We have the Afghanistan's acting foreign minister in India right now, and at the same time, Pakistan decides to strike Kabul. How do you reflect on the optics and the timing of this?
Well, the timing is very interesting because, as you pointed out, these clashes have coincided with the visit of the Afghan foreign minister to India. Now, let me be very categorical. India has nothing to do with these clashes.
Yes.
India wants good relations with Afghanistan. We have long standing historical relations. We have taken part in the development of infrastructure projects in Afghanistan, and we want to help the Afghan people by giving them whatever assistance is possible. But Afghanistan is caught in a separate conflict with Pakistan, which has escalated around this time. And it is quite interesting that the Afghan foreign minister, who's visiting India, has issued such a stern warning to Pakistan. Now, let me mention that the Taliban's return to power in Kabul had been facilitated with Pakistan's support. And Pakistan had thought that the Taliban would be a manageable proxy. But its perception has gone totally wrong. Now, while Pakistan has historically supported the Taliban to exert influence in Afghanistan, the new Taliban government has proven to be quite independent and uncooperative towards Pakistan. In fact, relations have deteriorated significantly since the Taliban returned to power in Kabul in August 2021. And as Professor Swaran Singh pointed out, the core issue at present is Pakistan's accusation that the Taliban government harbors and supports the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, or the TTP, which Islamabad blames for a surge in militant attacks within Pakistan. Now, Mr. Imtiaz Gul was saying that the Durand Line issue is dead and that there is a fence, etc. But the Afghan government, particularly the Taliban, does not recognize the Durand Line. In fact, the two nations have a long history of strained relations and conflicting views over the Durand Line. The Afghan government says that the Durand Line was established during the colonial era, and it does not recognize the Durand Line. In particular, there are certain issues which have augmented the tensions. Pakistan's mass deportation of Afghan nationals, including those with legal refugee status, has exacerbated tensions and further strained relations. So I don't see these tensions easing at the moment. There are historical disputes, and these have been exacerbated by recent tensions, particularly relating to cross-border attacks by both sides.
Ambassador, a brief follow-up question to that, because you think the tensions are not going to cease anytime soon. Do you think we've reached a point of no return when it comes to Afghan-Pak ties then?
Other countries are counseling diplomacy. Saudi Arabia and Qatar have been in the forefront. Nobody wants an escalation of this conflict. But it is up to the two sides to resolve this matter. And the tensions seem to be increasing because of the cross-border attacks. So nobody wants an escalation. Nobody wants to have the two countries reach a point of no return. But the escalation of tensions is very, very evident and is a cause of worry.
All right. Thank you, Ambassador, for joining us here and sharing your inputs. Now, going across to Mr. Imtiaz Gul, because Ambassador was just mentioning that a lot of external actors are involved in this. They're trying to intervene and bring in a pause. So how is Pakistan looking at the intervention of these actors such as Saudi Arabia and Qatar as well?
Well, I think Pakistan has always been saying that it wants a peaceful neighborhood. But when all the leads lead you to Kabul and to other parts of Afghanistan where those people or those terrorist groups are based, being hosted actually officially, which are responsible, who are actually orchestrating terrorism inside Pakistan. So regardless of what other countries may say, I mean, when al-Zawahiri was killed a couple of years ago, So nobody pointed fingers at Pakistan or at the United States. It was the CIA drone that killed Zawahiri. But when Pakistan tried to do the same to take out Noor Wali Masood, all of a sudden Afghan Taliban woke up saying that, well, their airspace had been violated. Their airspace is violated almost every day. A number of Al Qaeda and TTP people have been killed. Almost all and most of the TTP leadership was killed by the CIA drones, and nobody pointed any fingers at that time. So I think the global politics basically is very selfish, is very cold-blooded. So the enemies of yesterday become allies of today. And this is a situation that Pakistan is now caught up in. Its people are being killed every day, and now it's very comfortable for outsiders to say exercise restraint. Pakistan has been exercising restraint, ever since the Taliban returned to power. But I think Pakistan finally drew a red line that the TTP cannot be allowed to basically cross that red line, and the Afghan Taliban, despite all their verbal commitments, I mean, they've been trying, but obviously they have failed in containing the TTP from organizing, orchestrating terrorist attacks inside Pakistan. So I think for Pakistani establishment, the security of Pakistan will come first. Although I would say it needs a different approach, not a knee-jerk reaction, not an emotional approach, what we saw in the past couple of days. It needs to recalibrate, just because this long border disfavors any kinetic, long drawn attacks. Pakistan technologically is a superior party when it comes to Afghanistan, but technological prowess or superiority doesn't guarantee success. The way the US NATO forces had to flee Afghanistan despite their technological superiority. This is a lesson that every country should keep in mind. And secondly, lastly, I would say there is no escape from a neighbor. There's a too long border to escape. So we really, Pakistan and Afghan leaders should also have to go for a more pragmatic way of engaging with Pakistan, rather than kicking up this issue of Durand Line, or of talking in a tone and tenor that would suggest that they want to take revenge from Pakistan. They will do, but in the end, and both countries will suffer. So both need to avoid a long-term attrition on both sides of the border.
All right. So you say that the knee-jerk reaction we are now witnessing is not the way out. Professor Swaran Singh, India has a lot of interest in Afghanistan in terms of connectivity projects, in terms of infrastructure projects. And at the time when we're seeing India and Afghanistan try to deepen their ties on every front, how is India monitoring the situation along the Pakistan-Afghanistan border?
Very clearly, India has a very deep strategic interest involved in ensuring access and indeed partnership with Afghanistan. Indeed, in 1990s and early 2000s, Afghanistan became an example of India's enormous amount of investments of infrastructure on the ground. A lot of that infrastructure is still in the process of being built. Some of that needs to be revived, some of that needs to be repaired. Several new initiatives were announced during the two foreign ministers meeting in New Delhi. Specifics of various health centers to be built in various provinces, ambulances to be given, cooperation in sports and culture, and so on. So India is really becoming proactive in exploring and building partnership with the Taliban. I think there is definitely an element of India's concern about balancing the China-Pakistan jointmanship in keeping India out of not just engaging, but also exploring various solutions to situations in Taliban-ruled Afghanistan. So I think there is again international scenario which impacts India's interest in Afghanistan. The fact that recently President Trump lifted the waiver on sanctions for India's investments in Taliban. So in that sense, there are multiple ways which make India really look forward to building strong relationship with Afghanistan as much as possible. But as far as the conflict is concerned, I think it's not going to sustain for too long because drivers on both sides are very much limited to ensuring regime credibility. And once both sides feel that they are comfortable in terms of their stature at home and abroad, or let's say when militaries feel the fatigue, I understand uh, Taliban is, in terms of technological edge, is on a back foot. Pakistan has an advantage. But remember, Taliban has also been a sort of war fighting for last 2 decades against United States. So even if the terrain on Durand Line may be very complex and difficult, Taliban has a credibility of having pushed United States out ultimately after 20 years. And they have that not just experience, but confidence. So both have their own advantages, but why I say that this violence may not constantly escalate and prolong is simply because I don't think they are seriously fighting to recast the borders. The
And,
drivers are very much
just bringing in Mr. Gul at this point. Mr. Gul, we have US trying to retake the Bagram base in Afghanistan. So do you think there is some influence of that decision on also the way Pakistan has been reacting to TTP and also Afghanistan?
Well, some people are talking about the possibility of a link between Pakistan's action inside Afghanistan and the Donald Trump's desire to take back Bagram Air Base. But I personally don't think so. This relates to Pakistan's internal security, which has been exacerbated by different proxies, by including the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan. And I think for too long, I mean, which country will basically keep ignoring the daily terrorist attacks which are consuming the lives of not only of civilians, innocent civilians, but also of the security apparatus, the police and the military. So I think Pakistan's patience had worn thin, and it basically was forced into this so-called hot pursuit, the kind of pursuit that the Americans had carried out across Afghanistan through drones, through missile attacks. Now, Pakistan, I think, probably thinks that this is the only way to convince the Taliban that they cannot expect empathy, sympathy, cooperation, while continue harboring those elements which
All
are
right.
piling misery on Pakistan every day.
Okay, I take your points, and on this point, I have to wrap this discussion. Mr. Imtiaz Gol and Professor Soren Singh, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your input.